They tell you that sacrifice is noble, that laying down your life for another makes you a hero, that kindness is rewarded, that the universe recognizes selfless acts and repays them with blessings. But when you're dying in a Montana blizzard at 23 years old, your fingers frozen blue, and your heart already shattered into pieces too small to count, you learn the devastating truth. Sacrifice doesn't make you noble, it just makes you dead. The storm had been raging for 6 hours when Callum Northridge finally picked up his son's trail. Not his son as he should be, a 7-year-old boy with dark hair and his mother's laugh, but his son as the curse had made him. A small black wolf with eyes like molten amber, too intelligent for any animal, leaving paw prints in snow that was already trying to bury them. Callum moved through the blizzard like a shadow given form, 6'4" of coiled muscle and barely restrained fury. His own wolf pressed so close to the surface that his eyes blazed gold in the whiteout conditions, that his hands had already shifted to claws without him consciously willing it. 2 months. 2 months since the curse took hold. 2 months of watching his child slip away by degrees, losing more humanity every day. 2 months of every healer, every witch, every blood mage in the Northern Territories failing to break what some dead woman had laid upon his son. The witch had died laughing. That's what haunted him. Even as Callum's hands had closed around her throat, even as the life left her eyes, she'd laughed. And she'd whispered 7 words that had become his waking nightmare. True love will break it. Good luck, Alpha. True love, the oldest, most impossible condition in any curse. His son was 7 years old. Asher couldn't fall in love, couldn't break this himself. Which meant Callum had to find another way, and every day that passed without answers was another day his boy slipped further from him. The trail led deeper into the backcountry. Asher had been running for hours, driven by instincts that were becoming more wolf than human with every passing week. Soon he wouldn't remember he'd ever been anything else. Soon those amber eyes would go blank and animal, and Callum would have lost his son as completely as he'd lost Isabel. The thought made something crack in his chest. He couldn't lose them both. He couldn't survive it. The wind shifted, carrying a sound that didn't belong. Not the howl of the storm or the crack of ice-laden branches. Something else. Something desperate and high-pitched and terrified. Sure. Callum moved faster, his alpha strength carrying him through drifts that would have stopped any human. The sound came again, closer now, not a howl, a whimper. The sound of a trapped animal that knows it's dying. He burst through a stand of pines and stopped. 20 feet ahead, a massive branch had fallen, weighed down by ice, until the old pine couldn't support it anymore. And beneath that branch, struggling weakly, was a small black shape, with eyes that met his with heartbreaking recognition. But Callum barely saw his son, because between him and Asher, crawling through snow, with movements that were more desperation than coordination, was a woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. Dark hair plastered to her skull, lips blue with cold, dressed in a thin cotton dress that had frozen stiff against her body. She should have been dead already. Everything about her said she should have been dead, but she was crawling toward his son. Callum watched, frozen by something he couldn't name, as this dying woman reached the branch. Her hands, God, her hands were already frostbitten. The fingers curled like claws found purchase on the ice-heavy wood. She wedged her shoulder underneath and pushed with strength she couldn't possibly have. The branch shifted an inch. Asher whimpered, paw caught blood dark against the snow. The woman made a sound, determination or agony, Callum couldn't tell. She pushed again. Her whole body shook with the effort. The branch shifted another inch, another, and then Asher was free, stumbling on 3 legs, and the woman collapsed face first into the snow. For 3 heartbeats, Callum stood there, mind trying to process what he'd just witnessed. A stranger. A dying stranger who should have been focused on her own survival. Using the last of her strength to save a wolf she didn't know, to save his son. Asher limped to the woman, nudging her face with his nose, making desperate sounds that were almost human, almost words, almost help her, please help her. Callum moved. He was beside them in seconds, dropping to his knees. The woman's eyes were closed lashes frozen together. Her skin was gray. When he pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse, her flesh was so cold it burned. But there, faint, irregular, but there. Who are you? He asked, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Why would you do this? Asher whined, pressing against Callum's side. The message was clear. Save her, like she saved me. Please. Callum gathered the woman into his arms. She weighed nothing, less than nothing, as if the cold and starvation had hollowed her out from the inside. He could feel her ribs through the frozen dress, could see the bruises on her arms, the marks of chains at her wrists. Someone had done this to her. Someone had reduced this woman to a dying thing in the snow, and still she'd reached out to save his child. "I've got her, Taro," he said to Asher, to himself, to the storm. "I've got her." He stood the woman cradled against his chest and began to run. Asher limped beside him, keeping pace despite his injured paw. The storm raged around them, but Callum barely felt it. His wolf had risen fully now, lending him strength and speed that blurred the line between man and beast. The castle was 8 miles away, through a blizzard, carrying a woman who might already be dead. He ran faster. The healers met him at the gates. They must have felt him coming, the way his power crackled through the pack bonds like lightning. By the time he burst through the main doors, Selene Ravencroft was already there, the High Priestess's ice-blue eyes taking in the scene with sharp intelligence. "She's hypothermic," Selene said, all business. No questions about who the woman was or why their king had brought her here. "Third stage? Maybe fourth. Get her to the healing rooms, now." Callum didn't argue. He followed Selene through corridors he knew by heart, through the castle that had been his family's seat for 200 years, into the south wing, where warmth and firelight and desperate hope waited. They stripped the frozen dress away, wrapped her in furs, built a fire so large it was almost dangerous. A younger healer, Ruby Hayes, competent, despite her youth, worked on the woman's hands with careful efficiency, trying to save fingers that might already be lost. "Her core temperature is 86 degrees, Ruby said quietly. "She should be dead." "But she's not," Callum said. It wasn't a question. "No, Your Majesty, she's not. Her heart's still beating. Slow but steady, she's a fighter." Callum looked down at the woman's face. Even unconscious, even dying, there was something in the set of her jaw. Something that spoke of strength that went deeper than muscle or bone. She'd used her last reserves to save a stranger. What kind of person did that? What kind of person had he brought into his home? Asher whined from the doorway. Selene had cleaned and bandaged his paw, but the cub refused to leave. He stared at the woman with those two human eyes, and Callum knew what his son was thinking. "She saved me. You have to save her." "Will she live?" Callum asked. Ruby hesitated. Selene didn't. "Maybe," the priestess said, "if she wants to, if she's got something to live for." "And if she doesn't," Selene met his eyes, "then you'll have to give her a reason." 3 days. 3 days she lay unconscious while the healers worked and Callum paced and Asher refused to leave her bedside. 3 days of wondering who she was, where she'd come from, why she'd been out in that storm dying. 3 days of the scent of her slowly saturating his rooms, wildflowers and wood smoke, and something uniquely her that made his wolf lift its head with interest he hadn't felt since Isabel died. On the 3rd day, as dawnlight filtered through the windows, her eyes finally opened. Callum had been standing at the window watching the sun paint the Montana peaks golden rose when he heard the sharp intake of breath behind him. He turned. She was trying to sit up, her hands tangled in the furs, her eyes gray. He saw now, storm gray, like the sky before snow, wide with confusion and fear. "Don't," he said, and the command in his voice made her freeze. "You'll hurt yourself." She stared at him. He watched her take in his size, his presence, the casual way he dominated the space just by existing in it. Watched fear flicker across her face and then remarkably die down into something calmer. Resignation, maybe. Like she'd been afraid before and learned it didn't help. "Where am I?" Her voice was rough, unused, beautiful in its brokenness. "My home. The Stormcrest territory." "Montana?" He moved closer, each step deliberate. "I'm Callum Northridge, AlphaKing of the Northern Summit." Something in her expression shifted. Not fear now, just a deep, bone-tired weariness. "Your son," she said, "the wolf, is he alive?" Callum stopped at the foot of the bed. "Because of you. You saved my son's life." "Good." She closed her eyes briefly. "That's good." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. She opened her eyes again, met his gaze without flinching. There was something in that look. Something that made him think she'd been staring down powerful men her whole life and learned they weren't as frightening as everyone claimed. "Because I understood what it felt like," she said simply. "To be trapped and alone and dying while the world ignored you." The words hit him like a physical blow. Not the answer he'd expected, not some noble declaration about saving the innocent or doing the right thing, just raw, honest understanding of what it meant to suffer. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than he'd intended. "Elena." A pause. "Elena Ashwood, of the Pinewood Ridge Pack, Idaho." Idaho, that was 300 miles south. And if she was from a pack, why had she been out in a blizzard alone, dressed like she was headed to a ceremony, not a winter journey? How did you end up in that storm, Elena Ashwood? She looked away then, out the window at the mountains, at the sky, at anything but him. When she spoke again, her voice was flat, emotionless in a way that told him the emotions were too big to let out. I was being transported to the breeding halls in the northern summit. My father sold me to pay a debt. The words were simple. The reality beneath them was anything but. Callum had heard of the breeding halls, knew what they were. Prisons dressed up as fertility centers where shifters who couldn't pay their debts sent their daughters to produce children for wealthy alphas. Once you went in, you didn't come out. Not whole, not yourself. The man transporting you, Callum said carefully. Where is he, Sim? Dead, I think, or gone. When the storm hit, he put me in a cave and went to sleep. Said I probably wouldn't make it through the night. Her lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. He was right. I shouldn't have. But you heard my son. I heard something crying, something alone and scared and dying. She looked at him then, and her gray eyes were fierce. I knew that sound. I was that sound. Callum's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to ask more, wanted to know what had broken this young woman so thoroughly that she'd recognize her own pain in a wolf's cry. Wanted to know who her father was so he could tear the man apart for selling his daughter like livestock. But before he could ask anything else, a soft yip came from the doorway. Asher stood there in wolf form, tail wagging, tentatively. His wolf-bright gaze was fixed on Elena with something that looked like hope. Elena's entire face transformed. The weariness fell away, replaced by genuine warmth. Hello, she said softly. I remember you. Are you okay? Your paw. Asher limped into the room and launched himself onto the bed with puppyish enthusiasm that Callum hadn't seen in weeks. He pressed his head against Elena's chest, making happy sounds that were almost yips, almost laughter. And Elena, this woman who'd been speaking in flat, dead tones about being sold and abandoned, wrapped her arms around Asher and smiled like she'd found something precious. Hey, brave boy, she murmured. You're okay. We're both okay. Callum watched his son melt against this stranger. Watched the tension leave Asher's small body for the first time since the curse took hold. Watched his child be for just a moment a child again. And he knew. This woman, this broken, beautiful, impossibly strong woman, was the answer he'd been searching for. Tell me about the curse, Elena said. They'd moved to the chairs by the fire. Asher had refused to leave Elena's side, curled against her leg with possessive contentment. She ran her fingers through his fur with unconscious affection, and every time she touched him, Callum saw his son relax a little more. What makes you think there's a curse? Callum asked. Elena raised an eyebrow. A 7-year-old wolf with human eyes who responds to complex commands and shows emotional intelligence beyond any animal. Either curse or something stranger. Smart. He'd known she was smart from her eyes, but having it confirmed sent a spike of something warm through his chest. His name is Asher, Callum said. He's my son, 7 years old. He had his first shift 6 months ago, earlier than most, but not unheard of. It should have been temporary. A few hours as a wolf, then back to human. He paused, the memory of that day still raw. The pride he'd felt watching Asher shift for the first time. The joy on his son's face at discovering his other form. And then the witch. The woman who'd come to court claiming she could enhance shifter abilities. Who'd performed a demonstration on Asher that was supposed to make future shifts easier. Instead, it had trapped him. 2 months ago, a woman cursed him, Callum continued, his voice hardening. She said it would help, said it would make him stronger. What it did was trap him in his wolf form. He can't shift back. Every day he stays like this, he loses more of his humanity. In another month, maybe 2, there won't be anything of my son left. Just an animal wearing his shape. Elena's hand stilled in Asher's fur. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. That's horrifying. Yes. What happened to the witch? I killed her. No emotion in his voice, just fact. The moment I realized what she'd done, I killed her. But she died laughing, told me only true love could break the curse. My son is 7. He can't fall in love, can't save himself. So I've been searching for another way. Elena looked down at Asher, at the way the cub pressed against her, seeking comfort. Every healer and witch in the kingdom has failed. Every one. And you think I can help? It wasn't a question. Callum stood, moving to the window. The sun was fully up now, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold. I think you're the only one who can. Every shifter who touches Asher feeds into the curse. Their wolf recognizes his, and it strengthens the binding, traps him deeper. He turned to face her. But you touched him, held him, and it didn't make it worse. Understanding dawned in her gray eyes. Because I don't have a wolf. You're a shifter who can't shift, Callum said. It wasn't an insult, just observation. Whatever you are, whatever makes you different, it means your touch doesn't feed the curse. You might be able to weaken it, daily contact, daily reinforcement, that he's not just a wolf, it's the only chance I have. Elena's fingers had resumed their gentle motion through Asher's fur. The cub had closed his eyes, relaxed in a way Callum hadn't seen in months. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Stay, Callum said. Live here. Spend time with Asher every day. Talk to him. Read to him. Remind him he's human. And in exchange, let me guess, you'll grant me anything within your power. He smiled without humor. I was going to say you'll have everything you need. Food, shelter, safety, a life without judgment. But yes, I owe you a blood debt for saving my son. Anything within reason I'll grant. And if I refuse, the question made his wolf bristle, made something dark and desperate rise in his chest. He pushed it down, barely. Then I'll lock you in a tower until the curse is broken or my son is dead. The words came out flat, final. Either way, you're not leaving. He expected anger, expected her to argue or plead or show some sign of the fear most people felt when an alpha made a threat. Instead, Elena just looked at him for a long moment. Then she glanced down at Asher, at the small wolf who'd already claimed a piece of her heart. You'd really imprison someone who saved your son's life. I would do anything to save Asher, Callum said quietly. Anything. Lock up innocence. Break every law I've sworn to uphold. Burn the world to ash if it meant my son survived. I'm not proud of that desperation, but I won't pretend it doesn't exist. Something in her expression shifted. Not quite respect, but close to it. At least you're honest. Always, I'll never lie to you, Elena. You deserve better than that. She was quiet for so long he thought she might refuse anyway. Might force him to make good on his threat and live with the shame of it. But then she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met his eyes with steel in her own. I'll stay, she said, not because you are forcing me, because I understand what it feels like to be trapped, to have everyone see you as something you're not, and because, she looked down at Asher again, because no child should have to face that alone. Your relief hit him like a wave. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I don't know if I can help. You already have. Look at him. They both looked. Asher had fallen asleep against Elena's leg, his small body completely relaxed. His breathing was even. His face, as much as a wolf could have expressions, was peaceful. He hasn't been that calm in months, Callum said softly. Whatever you did, whatever you are, he trusts you already. Elena's hand rested on Asher's head, protective. Then I'll try. For him. I'll try. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost like normalcy. Mornings Elena would wake to find Asher already at her door, his tail wagging with an enthusiasm that made her heart ache. She'd take him to the gardens even in winter. The castle grounds were beautiful, and they'd walk or play or just sit in the cold air together. She learned to communicate with him through a system of paw taps and head tilts. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. It was slow, frustrating for them both, but when she finally decoded his messages, the joy in his eyes made every painstaking minute worthwhile. Afternoons were for learning. Callum had a library. 3 stories of books rising toward a glass-domed ceiling filled with more knowledge than Elena had ever seen in one place. He'd find her there most days, curled in a chair with a book and Asher at her feet. And he'd teach her, old lupine, the language the first shifters spoke, the language used to bind the curse. He was patient in a way she hadn't expected, explaining complex grammar and showing her how the symbols fit together, never making her feel stupid when she struggled. This word, he said one afternoon, pointing to an angular symbol, the devotion, but it has layers, not just loyalty, willing sacrifice, choosing something even when the cost is high. Their eyes met across the page. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with ancient languages. Like staying in a castle to help a cursed child, Elena said quietly. Like crawling into a blizzard to save a dying wolf, Callum countered. The moment stretched. Elena was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how warm his hand was when it brushed hers on the book, how his scent pine in winter and something uniquely him seemed to wrap around her like a physical thing. Asher yipped from the floor, breaking the spell. They pulled apart and Callum cleared his throat. "There's something I want to show you," he said. He retrieved a leather-bound journal from a high shelf, old but beautifully preserved. When he handed it to Elena, she opened it carefully. The pages were filled with riddles, hundreds of them, written in an elegant script that spoke of education and joy and a mind that loved puzzles. "My wife," Callum said softly. "Isabel. She collected riddles, loved them, spent hours challenging people to solve them." Elena's chest tightened. "I'm sorry for your loss. It was 2 years ago, hunting accident. One moment she was there laughing and alive. The next, he stopped, swallowed. Asher was 5, old enough to understand death, too young to understand forever. That must have been impossible. It was, still is some days." He gestured to the journal. "But there's one riddle in there she never solved. Last page. An old witch gave it to her, and Isabel spent years trying to figure it out." Elena flipped to the end. There in Isabel's script were 4 lines. "I am given freely but never taken. I can be broken but leave no pieces. I grow stronger when tested, yet I am the most fragile thing. What am I?" Elena read it 3 times. The answer felt close, like a name on the tip of her tongue, but it slipped away every time she reached for it. "I don't know," she admitted. "Neither do I. Neither did Isabel. She used to joke that some riddles were worth waiting for." His voice went rough. "I think she would have liked you." The words hit her harder than they should have. "Why?" "Because you don't back down. You speak your mind. You see Asher as a person, not a cursed animal. And you're here even though you're terrified." "I'm not terrified." Callum smiled, actually smiled. "You're a terrible liar, Elena Ashwood. I can hear your heartbeat. It's racing." Heat flooded her cheeks. "That's not fear." "No," he said softly, his amber gaze holding hers. "I don't think it is." The dinner invitation came on her 10th day at the castle, a formal note delivered by Ruby. "The king requests the pleasure of your company at dinner. Private dining room, not the great hall." Elena's hands shook as she read it. Private, just the 2 of them and Asher. That felt significant, dangerous, like crossing a line she hadn't known existed. "Should I?" she started. "You should go," Ruby said, smiling. "Trust me, you should definitely go." So she went. The private dining room was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate. A table that could seat 8 but was set for 2 with a cushion on the floor for Asher. Firelight flickering, the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread making her stomach clench with hunger. Callum stood when she entered. He'd changed from his usual black into something slightly less formal, but he still dominated the space just by existing in it. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "Always." He pulled out her chair. "Everything here is a choice, Elena. I might have threatened you that first day, but I meant what I said. You can leave whenever you want." She sat hyper-aware of how close he was. "And the curse? I'll find another way. I won't keep you prisoner." Asher trotted in and settled on his cushion, looking between them with bright, knowing eyes. If a wolf could smirk, he was doing it. Dinner was extraordinary. Food Elena hadn't tasted in years, prepared with care she'd never experienced. They ate in comfortable silence for a while before Callum spoke. "Tell me about your pack," he said. "Your family." So she did. Not because she wanted to, but because it felt like a trade. He'd shared about Isabel. She could share this. She told him about being the daughter who couldn't shift. About Seraphina Sarah, her older sister, who'd shifted beautifully at 15, a silver wolf with ice blue eyes that made visiting alphas stare. About how she'd waited at 16 for her first shift. At 17. At 18 when her father finally said the words, "You're broken, Elena. No wolf, no shift, no future." She told him about Garrett Thornhill, who'd courted her for 3 months and then walked away because his father said he needed a proper mate. About being sold like livestock to pay a debt. About accepting it because she'd been told so many times she was worthless that she'd started to believe it. By the time she finished, her throat was tight and her eyes burned. But she didn't cry. She'd gone too numb for tears. Callum was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and fierce. "Your father is a fool. The man who rejected you was too blind to see what stood before him. You saved my son when you were dying yourself. That speaks to character that no wolf, no ability to shift could ever match." The words cracked something open in her chest. Something that had been locked down tight for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I know you're brave. I know you're kind. I know you see Asher as the person he is, not the animal he appears to be." He leaned forward. I know that in 10 days you've become essential to this family. And I know," he stopped, jaw clenched, like he was fighting against words that wanted to escape. "You know what?" Elena asked. "That I look forward to seeing you every day more than I should." The admission hung between them. Dangerous, thrilling, terrifying. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Callum, Asher stood from his cushion and padded over to Elena. He rested his head on her lap and looked up at her with those two human eyes. Then he carefully, deliberately pawed at her hand. 5 taps, then silence, then 3 more. M.O.M. Elena froze. "Asher, I'm not—" He did it again, insistent, then turned and pointed his nose at Callum. Back to Elena. The message was clear. Family. Your family. Elena looked at Callum and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "For me to stay? Not just until the curse breaks, but—" "I want things I have no right to want," Callum said roughly. "I want to know everything about you. I want to hear your thoughts on every book we read. I want to make you laugh because the sound is the best thing I've heard in years. I want—" He stopped himself, stood abruptly, paced to the window. "But you should be free to choose your own path." He continued, his back to her. "Not trapped here by debt and duty. When the curse breaks, you should be able to go wherever you want, do whatever you want, live the life you were denied." Elena stood, crossed to him, put her hand on his arm and felt the tension thrumming through him. "What if I don't feel trapped?" she asked quietly. He turned and the look in his eyes made her knees weak. "What if I look forward to our afternoons in the library?" she continued. "What if I go to sleep thinking about our conversations? What if I'm—" She took a breath. "What if I'm falling for you too and it terrifies me?" "Why does it terrify you?" "Because nothing good has ever stayed in my life. Everyone I've cared about has left. My mother chose my father's decision over me. Garrett chose his pack's expectations. Even Sarah, she didn't fight for me. No one fights for me." Callum's hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite their size, despite the deadly strength she knew they held. "I would," he said. 2 words, simple and absolute. "I would burn kingdoms for you, Elena. I would defy every law and tradition. I would—" "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I don't." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "I'm an AlphaKing. My word is law. And I'm telling you with everything I am that you matter, that I see you, that if you choose to stay, not because of debt, but because you want to, I will spend every day proving you made the right choice." Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hands and the intensity of his gaze and the way her whole world had narrowed down to this moment. "I don't know how to believe that," she whispered. "Then let me show you," Callum said, "however long it takes." They stood like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, and something fundamental shifted between them. This wasn't just attraction, wasn't just gratitude or convenience or forced proximity. This was real, and it was terrifying. Asher yippered from behind them, breaking the moment. When they turned, he was doing circles on his cushioned tail, wagging so hard his whole body shook. Then he pawed out 3 letters, M-I-N-E, pointed at Callum, then Elena, then himself. The message was clear. "You're mine, both of you. My family." And looking at Callum's face, at the soft wonder there, the fragile hope, Elena felt the last piece of her broken heart slot back into place. "Okay," she said, to Callum, to Asher, to herself. "Okay, I'll stay." Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Because for the first time in her life, she'd found somewhere she belonged. 3 months. 3 months since Elena Ashwood crawled through a blizzard to save a dying wolf cub. 3 months since Callum Northridge pulled her from the snow more dead than alive. 3 months since the she-wolf who couldn't shift and the grieving king looked at each other and recognized something neither wanted to name. 3 months of mornings in the garden with Asher watching him grow stronger day by day. 3 months of afternoons in the library bent over books written in languages that had been old when Rome was young. 3 months of evenings in Callum's study, sharing wine and stories and silences that felt more intimate than words. 3 months of falling. Elena woke on the first day of the 4th month to find Asher already at her door. But this time when she opened it, he wasn't in wolf form. He stood there on 2 legs, a 7-year-old boy with dark hair that fell into amber eyes and his father's sharp features softened by youth. Wearing pajamas that Ruby must have left out for him, grinning like he'd just discovered the greatest secret in the world. "Asher," Elena breathed. "Morning, Elena." His voice was rough from disuse, but it was his voice. Human and real and beautiful. "I held it all night. Dad said I could wake you up to show you. She dropped to her knees and pulled him into a hug. He came willingly, wrapping small arms around her neck. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. So proud. I wanted you to see me, the real me, he pulled back his smile, faltering. I can't hold it much longer, maybe an hour, but I wanted you to know I'm still in here, still fighting. I know, sweetheart. I've always known. His smile returned bright and fierce. Then his form flickered, boy and wolf overlapping for a heartbeat, and the small black cub stood where the child had been. But Asher's tail was wagging, and when he pawed at her hand, it was to spell out 3 letters. M-O-M. Elena's eyes burned. Yeah, baby, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The change in Asher was remarkable. He could shift at will now, though holding human form still exhausted him after a few hours. But those hours were enough. Enough to speak, enough to laugh, enough to be the child the curse had tried to steal. He followed Elena everywhere, in the gardens chattering about the birds and the snow and the way the mountains looked when the sun hit them just right. In the library, curling up beside her while she read, sometimes in wolf form, sometimes as a boy who fell asleep with his head on her lap. And he called her mom, not hesitantly, not as a question, just mom, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Callum watched it all with something in his eyes that Elena couldn't quite name. Pride, yes. Relief, absolutely. But something else, too. Something that made her breath catch when she saw him looking at her like she'd hung the moon. He's never been this happy, Callum said one afternoon. They were in the library watching Asher in human form build an elaborate fort out of cushions. Even before the curse, even when Isabel was alive, I've never seen him this content. He feels safe, Elena said quietly. Because of you. She shook her head. Because of us. You give him stability, structure. You're his father, Callum, the person he trusts most in the world. I'm just the person who saved his life, who sees him as more than a curse or a tragedy, who loves him for exactly who he is. Callum's hand found hers on the arm of the chair. You're not just anything, Elena. You're essential. His thumb traced circles on her palm. The touch was casual, unconscious probably, but it sent heat racing up her arm and made her acutely aware of how close they were sitting. Callum, I know. His voice dropped low. I know this is complicated. I know you're here because of a debt, not by choice. I know I shouldn't. Stop. Elena turned to face him fully. Stop assuming I don't want this. I stayed because I wanted to. I'm here because I choose to be, and what I feel for you. She took a breath. It terrifies me, but it's real. Callum's eyes blazed amber. Elena! Look, Asher shouted from his cushioned fort. I made a castle, come see. The moment shattered. They pulled apart and Elena laughed despite the frustration curling in her belly. Duty calls, she said. Callum's smile was rueful. It always does. But later when Asher had shifted back to wolf form and fallen asleep between them on the library floor, Callum took her hand again. And this time when his thumb traced those slow circles, she laced her fingers through his. They sat like that until the sun set. Not speaking, just being. Together. The court dinner was announced 3 days later, a formal gathering of visiting alphas and territory dignitaries, required attendance for the royal family and their guests. Elena's stomach dropped when Ruby delivered the invitation. I can't go to that, she said. I don't belong. The king specifically requested your presence, Ruby interrupted gently. He sent this for you. She held out a dress box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the most beautiful gown Elena had ever seen. Deep midnight blue that faded to silver at the hem, embroidered with constellations that caught the light like real stars. A note was pinned to the bodice in Callum's angular handwriting. For tonight, I'd like you there as my guest, my choice. See, Elena's hands shook as she lifted the dress. It was exquisite, the kind of thing a queen would wear, not a she-wolf with no future. I look terrible, she said when Ruby had finished preparing her. You look beautiful, Ruby said firmly, and more importantly, you look like you belong, because you do, Elena. You belong here. The great hall was overwhelming, vaulted ceilings painted with murals of legendary wolves running beneath stars, long tables laden with enough food to feed an army, and dozens of shifters in formal dress, their power crackling through the air like static electricity. Every eye turned when Elena entered. She heard the whispers immediately, felt them like physical blows. Can't even shift. What is the king thinking? Worthless bloodline. Her steps faltered. This was a mistake. She should turn around, go back to her rooms. Hide. Then Callum was there. He appeared at her side like he'd been waiting for her, offering his arm, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "You're breathtaking," he murmured low enough only she could hear. "They're all staring." "Let them." His hand covered hers on his arm. "You're here as my honored guest. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The threat of warning in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Around them, the whispers quieted. He led her to the head table, seated her at his right hand, the position traditionally reserved for the queen or the king's chosen mate. The statement couldn't have been clearer if he'd announced it to the entire hall. Beside her, a woman with silver hair and ice blue eyes watched with calculating interest. Lady Selene Ravencroft, the High Priestess. They'd met briefly during Elena's recovery, but this was the first time they'd sat together. "Lady Elena," Selene said, her voice carrying the musical lilt of the far north. "I've heard much about you." "I'm just Asher's friend," Elena said carefully. "Interesting." Selene sipped on her wine. "Tell me, Elena Ashwood, do you believe in true love?" The question felt like a trap. Elena chose her words carefully. "I believe love is real, but I think true love, the fairy tale kind, is often misunderstood. It's not magic or destiny, it's choice. It's seeing someone fully flaws and all and choosing them anyway. Every day, even when it's hard. Especially then." Something flickered in Celine's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Because broken things can still be valuable," Elena continued quietly. "Broken things can still be loved." "Indeed," Celine murmured. "Perhaps there's more to you than appears, child." Before Elena could respond, a young alpha approached the table, blond and blue-eyed, built like a warrior. His smile was pleasant, but there was calculation in his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow, "I wondered if I might have the honor of dancing with your guest." The pause before guest was deliberate, an insult disguised as courtesy, implying Elena was entertainment, a diversion, not someone worthy of real respect. Callum went very, very still. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every alpha in the room felt it, the sudden press of power that said their king was not pleased. "Elena is not entertainment for visiting alphas," Callum said, his voice dropping into something dangerous. "She is under my personal protection. She is honored above anyone in this room except my son. If you cannot treat her with proper respect, Thornhill, you can leave." Garrett Thornhill, Elena's ex-lover, the man who'd walked away because she wasn't good enough. Recognition crashed over her. Garrett's eyes widened as he finally looked at her, really looked, and saw who sat at the king's right hand. "Elena," he breathed. "Hello, Garrett." Her voice was steady, calm. "It's been a while." I didn't know." He looked between her and Callum, understanding dawning. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. I simply didn't recognize—" "Leave," Callum said. "One word. Absolute. Now." Garrett fled. The hall had gone silent. Every eye was on them. On Callum, radiating barely leashed fury. On Elena, sitting straight and proud at his side. Callum stood. His massive frame made the young alpha look suddenly small. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. "Elena Ashwood of Pinewood Ridge is my chosen companion. She is valued above every person in this room save my son. Any disrespect toward her is disrespect toward me. Govern yourselves accordingly." He sat back down. The hall erupted in whispers, but Elena barely heard them. Because under the table, Callum had found her hand again, and he was holding it like he'd never let go. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." After dinner, Callum led her to a private balcony overlooking the mountains. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light. The Montana peaks stretched endlessly, beautiful and harsh, and utterly unforgiving, like the world they lived in. "I'm sorry," Callum said finally. "I know that was difficult." "It was worth it." Elena leaned against the railing. "To see you put Garrett in his place. He's the one who rejected you." "Yes. I should have done worse than embarrass him." Elena smiled despite herself. "Your tyrannical tendencies are showing." "Good." He moved closer until she could feel the heat of him against her back. "You bring them out in me. This need to protect you, to make sure no one ever makes you feel worthless again." "Callum, if the curse breaks," he said quietly. "When it breaks, will you stay?" The question hung between them. Not rhetorical this time. Real. Elena turned to face him. "Are you asking me to?" "I'm asking if you want to. Not because of Asher, not because of debt or duty, but because," he stopped, started again. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Elena, And I need to know if there's a chance you might feel the same. Her breath caught. You can't know that. We've only known each other 3 months. I know that every morning the first thing I think about is whether you're awake yet. I know that your laugh is the best sound I've heard since Isabel died. I know that when you touch Asher, when you love my son like he's yours, it makes something in my chest crack open. His hands framed her face. I know that losing you would destroy me. Is that enough? I'm terrified, Elena whispered. So am I. Everyone I've ever cared about has left me. I won't. You can't promise that. I can. I'm an Alpha King. My word is law. And I'm telling you, Elena Ashwood, that I choose you. Today, tomorrow, every day after. I choose you. The words broke something open inside her. All the walls she'd built, all the armor she'd wrapped around her heart. It cracked and fell away, leaving her raw and vulnerable and absolutely terrified and absolutely in love. I choose you too, she breathed. Callum kissed her, not gentle, not tentative, but fierce and claiming and desperate, like he'd been holding himself back for months and finally had permission to let go. Elena kissed him back with everything she had, poured 3 months of longing and fear and hope into it, felt his arms come around her, lifting her against him like she weighed nothing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Callum rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said again. Please, whatever happens with the curse, whatever the kingdom says, stay with me. Before Elena could answer, a scream split the night, high-pitched, terrified, coming from inside the castle. Asher. They ran. Sher's room was chaos. The boy he'd been in human form when they left for dinner was convulsing on the bed. His body jerked violently, caught between shapes. Wolf and human flickering so fast it looked like he was tearing apart from the inside. Foam flecked his muzzle. His eyes had rolled back. And he was making sounds, terrible, broken sounds, that weren't quite animal, weren't quite human. What's happening? Elena demanded, rushing to his side. The curse is fighting back. Celine appeared in the doorway, her priestess robe swirling. Every time he gets closer to breaking through, it retaliates. Callum was already at his son's side, hands hovering uselessly. How do we stop it? You can't. It has to run its course. Elena didn't think. She gathered Asher into her arms, pressing his convulsing body against her chest. Listen to my voice, she said urgently. You're not alone. I'm here. Your father's here. We've got you. Asher's form flickered again. For one impossible moment, she saw him, really saw him. A 7-year-old boy with terror in his amber eyes. The riddle, Elena said suddenly. Asher, remember the riddle I am given freely but never taken. I can be broken but leave no pieces. What's the answer? His convulsions slowed slightly. His eyes focused on her face. You know it, she encouraged. I know you do. What grows stronger when tested? What's the most fragile thing? Asher's mouth opened. His form stabilized, human now, fully human. And in a voice rough with pain and triumph, he whispered one word, love. Then he collapsed unconscious but breathing. The convulsions stopped. His heartbeat steadied. The room was silent except for their ragged breathing. He spoke, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. Callum, he spoke. Callum's hands were shaking as he checked his son's pulse. He's okay. His voice broke. You did it. You brought him back. Celine moved closer, examining Asher with professional detachment. But there was something in her ice blue eyes, something that looked like hope. The curse is weakening, she said quietly, significantly. Whatever you did, it worked. Love. Elena looked down at Asher's peaceful face. The answer to the riddle is love. And somehow he knew. Isabel's riddle, Callum said, wonder in his voice. She left it for this moment. For him. For us. They stayed like that until dawn. Elena holding Asher. Callum holding them both. And for the first time in months, the Alpha King allowed himself to hope. 4 days later, everything changed. Elena was in the library when Celine found her. The priestess's face was grave. We need to talk, Celine said, about what happens next. Dread settled in Elena's stomach. The curse is weakening. Asher's getting stronger every day. Isn't that enough? He can shift at will now, but he can only hold human form for a few hours before exhaustion forces him back. That's progress, but it's not freedom. Celine sat across from her. And the kingdom is getting nervous. What do you mean? An Alpha King whose heir is half cursed is vulnerable. Enemies see weakness. Allies see instability. The council has been meeting. What does that have to do with me? Celine pulled out a scroll. Old parchment covered in the angular script of old lupine. This is the original curse documentation. I've been studying it for months, and I found something. She spread it on the table, pointing to a specific passage. The binding will persist until the catalyst of love releases the beloved through willing sacrifice. The words swam before Elena's eyes. I don't understand. You're the catalyst, Celine said gently. Your presence weakens the curse. Your love gives Asher strength. But to break it completely, truly, completely, you have to leave. No, the word came out flat, final. The curse feeds on attachment, on dependence. As long as Asher relies on you to maintain his humanity, the curse has roots. You have to sever those roots by removing yourself entirely. That doesn't make sense. Love doesn't work that way. Old lupine curses do. Celine's voice was kind but implacable. Willing sacrifice, Elena. Giving up what you most want for the good of the one you love. You love Callum. You love Asher. You found family here. Leaving will destroy you. Then I won't leave. Then Asher will never be fully free. He'll be trapped in this half-state forever. And eventually, within a year, maybe two, the strain will kill him. The words hit like physical blows. Elena's hands clenched on the table. Does Callum know? The council presented their findings this morning. He's with them now, refusing to even consider it. Of course he was. Callum would never ask this of her, would rather watch the world burn than force her to leave. But that wasn't a choice, not really. I need to talk to him, Elena said. He's in the throne room, but Selena's hand caught her wrist. There's something else. Victor Kane didn't die in the blizzard. Elena's blood went cold. What? My spies report he survived. He's been seen in the Southern Territory speaking with enemies of Stormcrest. He knows you're here, and he's planning something. Planning what? Revenge. He claims Callum stole his property, that you're rightfully his. He's building support, calling for your return. Elena's mind raced. Victor alive. Victor coming for her. Victor using her presence as a wedge against Callum. The council was right. She was a weakness, a vulnerability that would be exploited. And Asher was dying by degrees. The choice wasn't a choice at all. I have to go, she said quietly. Elena, I have to. Don't you see, if I stay, Asher dies. And Victor uses me to destroy Callum. But if I leave, the curse breaks and you're alone. Better alone than watching everyone I love suffer because of me. The throne room doors were closed. She could hear raised voices inside. You cannot ask this of her. Callum's voice raw with fury. I won't. Your Majesty, be reasonable. Another voice. Male. Officious. Reasonable. You want me to choose between my son's freedom and the woman I love. How is that reasonable? Elena pushed the doors open. The throne room was vast. Callum's throne sat on a raised dais, but he wasn't in it. He stood at the center of a semicircle of council members, his massive frame radiating barely controlled violence. Every head turned when she entered. Elena, Callum started. Is it true? She asked, walking forward. Will leaving break the curse? We don't know that for certain, someone began. Yes or no? Celine, standing among the council, met her eyes. The magic suggests it. Willing sacrifice. The catalyst releases the beloved. How long does Asher have if I stay? A year, maybe two. Then the strain becomes too much. And if I leave, the curse should break within days, a week at most. Elena looked at Callum, saw the fear and fury and helpless grief in his eyes. I'll go, she said quietly. No. Callum was in front of her in an instant. No, I forbid it. I'm the king and Asher is your son. Elena reached up there, touching his face. Your heir, the future of this kingdom. I'm choosing his life, his freedom. That's not your choice to make. Elena, please. You taught me what love means, what choosing someone means. Her voice cracked. It means wanting their happiness more than your own. A council member, an older man with sharp eyes, cleared his throat. The she-wolf will leave within 3 days. That gives the prince time to adjust. Shut up, Callum said, his voice dropping into something deadly. All of you, get out! The council fled. Alone, Callum pulled Elena against him, held her so tight she could barely breathe. There has to be another way, he said into her hair. Please, don't do this. You'd do the same for Asher. You'd sacrifice anything. Not you. I can't sacrifice you. Then I'll do it for you. Elena pulled back enough to see his face. Let me do this. Let me save him. It's the only thing I can give him that actually matters. Callum made a sound like something breaking. He buried his face in her neck, and she felt wetness against her skin. The Alpha King was crying. "I love you," he choked out. "I love you, and I'm losing you, and I don't know how to survive it." "You'll survive because you're strong, because Asher needs you." Elena kissed his temple. "And because someday, maybe not soon, but someday you'll be happy again." "I'll never love anyone else." The words should have made her happy. Instead, they broke her heart. A small voice interrupted them. "Elena." They turned. Asher stood in the doorway, in human form, wearing the clothes Ruby had made for him, looking small and lost and terrified. "I heard," he said, voice thick with tears. "You're leaving because of me." Elena dropped to her knees. "Not because of you. For you, that's different. I don't want you to go." He ran to her, throwing his arms around her neck. "You're my mom. You can't leave." The words shattered her. "Oh, sweetheart." She held him close. "I'll always be part of you. Always, even when I'm gone." "That's not the same." He was sobbing now. "Please, please don't leave me." "I know it's not the same, but you deserve to be free, to shift whenever you want, to be strong and healthy and whole. And if this is what it takes," Callum knelt beside them, wrapping them both in his arms. The three of them clung to each other, a family breaking apart, trying to memorize the feeling of being whole. "3 days," Callum said finally, his voice wrecked. "We have 3 days." Elena nodded against his chest. 3 days to say goodbye. 3 days before her heart ripped itself in half. 3 days before she had to prove that love, real love, meant letting go. The cottage was perfect in all the wrong ways. Stone walls that kept out the Wyoming wind. A garden plot that would flourish come spring. Shelves lined with books, classics, and new releases, and everything in between. A fireplace that heated the single room to comfortable warmth. Gold hidden beneath the floorboards enough to last 3 lifetimes. Everything Elena Ashwood had ever wanted. Except the 2 people who made any of it matter. She'd been there 3 days when the first raven arrived. Black wings against gray sky. A scroll tied to its leg with silver thread. The seal pressed into dark wax was a wolf's head, Callum's personal mark, not the official crest of Stormcrest territory. Her hands shook as she broke it open. The handwriting was angular, controlled. So controlled, she could feel him fighting to keep his emotions contained. Elena Asher held human form for 8 hours yesterday. No exhaustion, no flickering. "The healers say the curse is weakening rapidly. He asks about you constantly. Every morning he goes to your chambers before he remembers you're not there. I tell him you're safe, that you're thinking of him. I hope that's true. I miss you. I know I shouldn't write that. I know this separation is necessary, but I can't pretend I don't feel the absence of you like a missing limb. The castle is quieter without you. Colder. Even with the fires burning, even with spring coming, everything feels like winter. Yours always, C." Elena read it 17 times before she could bring herself to respond. Her letter was shorter, safer. She told him she was glad about Asher's progress, told him the cottage was comfortable, told him she hoped he was well. She didn't mention that she cried herself to sleep every night, that the cottage felt like a beautiful tomb, that she woke reaching for him and found only empty space. Some truths were too raw to share. The letters came weekly at first. Callum wrote about Asher's progress, how he could shift at will, now holding either form for as long as he wanted, how his strength was returning, how he was catching up on the childhood the curse had stolen, how he'd started combat training and surprised everyone with his natural talent. He wrote about the kingdom, visiting alphas and territorial disputes and the endless bureaucracy of ruling, about a drought in the southern territories and a trade agreement with the western packs. He wrote about small things, a book he thought she'd enjoy, a bird's nest he'd found in the garden where she used to walk with Asher, the way the stars looked on clear nights. He never wrote about moving on, never mentioned finding someone else, but he also never asked her to come back, and slowly, painfully, Elena started to build a life in her isolation. She tended the garden, coaxing vegetables from the rich soil, read everything in the cottage, then walked half a day to the nearest village to trade for more books, taught herself to cook properly, to mend clothes, to exist in the quiet solitude of her own company. She learned to be alone, but she never learned to stop hurting. 6 weeks after she left, a different raven arrived. This one bore Selena Ravencroft's seal, the crescent moon of the priestesses. "Elena, the curse is broken. Completely. Asher is free. I thought you should know. The kingdom celebrates. The council is satisfied. Prince Asher has been formally confirmed as crown prince and heir, and the Alpha King has not smiled once since you left. whatever that's worth, S. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she built a fire in the hearth and burned it, watching the parchment curl and blacken and turn to ash. Asher was free. That's what mattered. That's what she'd sacrificed everything for. The fact that her heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice, that she sobbed until she couldn't breathe, until her ribs ached and her throat was raw, that was just the price. She'd known it would cost her everything. She just hadn't known how long forever would feel. 3 months and Callum's letters changed, not dramatically, just small shifts in tone, more formal, more distant, like he was slowly learning to let go. Elena Asher starts advanced combat training next week. He's nervous but excited. His instructors say he has remarkable instincts for someone his age. The spring council meeting concluded yesterday. Several territorial disputes were resolved peacefully. Trade agreements with the Eastern Pacts are moving forward. I hope you're well. C. No more yours always. No more mentions of missing her. Just updates. Polite and careful and slowly fading. Elena told herself it was good, healthy, exactly what needed to happen. He was moving on, building a life that didn't revolve around a woman who'd left. She told herself she was happy for him. She almost believed it. 10 months after she left, Elena heard the first rumor. She'd gone to the village for supplies, flour, salt, new candles. The merchant was a chatty woman named Bess, who loved gossip more than gold. Did you hear? Bess said, bagging Elena's purchases. The AlphaKing up in Montana is getting married. Some princess from the western reaches. Beautiful, they say. Perfect match for a king. About time, too. A man like that shouldn't be alone. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. What? She managed. The wedding's supposed to be this summer. Big affair. Every territory sending representatives. They say, oh dear, you've gone pale. Are you all right? I'm fine. Elena forced coins into Bess's hand. Thank you. She made it halfway back to the cottage before she had to stop, stumbled off the trail into the trees, and vomited into the bushes, her whole body shaking. Married. He was getting married. Of course he was. He was an AlphaKing. He needed a queen, someone who could give him more heirs, someone who could shift and fight and fulfill all the duties Elena never could, someone who wasn't broken. She told herself she had no right to be devastated, that she'd left, that she'd chosen this, that he deserved happiness. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two very different things. That night, she didn't write back to his latest letter, or the one after that. What was the point? He was building a new life. He didn't need letters from a woman who used to matter. 12 months and Ruby Hayes appeared at her door. Elena almost didn't recognize her. The former servant was dressed for travel, practical clothes, not a uniform. But her warm brown eyes were the same. Ruby, Elena breathed, what are you doing here? Can I come in? Elena led her inside, numb with shock. Ruby accepted tea with grateful hands, settling at the small table like they did this every day. How did you find me? Elena asked. The king told me where you were, before I left the castle. You don't work there anymore. No. Ruby's voice was thick with emotion. I couldn't watch it anymore. Watch him slowly dying inside while pretending everything was fine. Watch Asher asking about you every single day. Watch the whole castle pretending that losing you wasn't destroying them both. Elena's chest tightened. But the marriage. The princess from the western reaches. Bess said, oh, that. Ruby waved dismissively. Rumor. Complete fiction. Hope flared in Elena's chest, dangerous and painful. What? The western reaches did send a princess in a delegation. Proposed an alliance marriage. Very formal. Very political. Ruby leaned forward. The king refused. Spectacularly, told him he was already spoken for, that his mate might not be at his side, but she existed, that he would not dishonor her by marrying someone else. He said that in front of the entire court, made quite the scene. Ruby smiled sadly. The council was furious, but he didn't budge, hasn't budged, won't even entertain the idea. Then why hasn't he asked me to come back? Ruby's expression turned exasperated. Because he thinks you don't want to. Elena, your letter stopped. You haven't written in 2 months. He thinks you've moved on, that you're building a new life and don't want to be dragged back into castle politics and royal duties. That's not, I thought he was moving on. You're both idiots, Ruby said fondly. Two people desperately in love convinced the other doesn't want them anymore. Elena pressed her hands to her face. He said he'd ask me to come back when enough time had passed. And you promised you'd try, Ruby countered. But you stopped writing. What was he supposed to think? I didn't know. I thought, Elena's voice broke. I thought he'd found someone better, someone whole, someone who could give him everything I can't. Ruby reached across the table, gripping her hands. Elena, listen to me. He's not moving on. He's barely surviving. He does his duty. He cares for Asher. He rules the kingdom. And then he locks himself in his study with your letters and pretends no one can hear him crying. The image shattered her. I didn't know, Elena whispered. Now you do. Ruby stood. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Elena spent 3 days wrestling with the question. Part of her wanted to run back immediately, to throw herself at Callum's feet and beg forgiveness for the silence, for the distance, for not being brave enough to believe they could have a future. But another part, the part that had been broken and discarded too many times, whispered caution. What if Ruby was wrong? What if Callum had just been kind to a former servant? What if returning would be awkward and painful and prove that some sacrifices couldn't be undone? On the 4th day, a new letter arrived. Callum's handwriting, but different, rushed, almost frantic. The seal was broken before she consciously decided to open it. Elena, I don't know if you're still reading these. You haven't responded in 2 months. Maybe you've moved on. Maybe you found happiness in your freedom. I hope you have. I hope you're building the life you deserve. I hope someone there sees you the way I do, as the strongest, bravest, most remarkable person they have ever met. But I need to tell you something. Even if you never respond, there's a ceremony next week, Asher's official presentation as Crown Prince. The moment we formally announce that the curse is completely broken and he's fit to inherit. He asked if you would be there. I told him I didn't know, that you might have other commitments, other priorities, that you'd built a life of your own. But Elena, I want you there, not for ceremony or duty or because the blood debt requires it. I want you there because you're family, because none of this means anything without you. Because every achievement Asher has, every milestone, every moment of joy, you should be there to share it. And if you don't come, I'll understand. I'll know it means you've chosen your own path. And I'll be happy for you, even if it kills me. But if there's any part of you that wants to try, that thinks maybe we could build something together even after everything, please come. I love you. I never stopped. I never will. Please come home. Yours always, Callum. Elena read the letter once, twice, 20 times. Then she started packing. The journey back took 3 days. She could have hired a fast carriage, but she needed the time to think, to prepare, to figure out what she'd say when she saw him again. In the end, she had nothing, just hope and terror and love so fierce it hurt to breathe. She arrived at the castle gates on the morning of the ceremony. The guards didn't recognize her at first. She was just another traveler in dust-covered clothes. But then an older guard, someone who'd been there during her time at the castle, looked closer. Lady Elena? His face split into a grin. Lady Elena, you came. We'd hoped wait here. I'll send word. No. Elena's heart hammered. Don't. I want to. I need to see for myself first. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. The ceremony starts in an hour. Great hall. You'll want to freshen up first. Your old chambers are still what? Empty. The king ordered them kept ready. Just in case. Just in case she came back. Elena's eyes burned. Thank you. She slipped through the gates and into the castle she'd called home for 3 too short months. Everything was the same. The corridors she knew by heart. The tapestries and portraits and the smell of pine in winter that would always mean Callum to her. Elena, she turned. Asher stood in the corridor, but not the small 7-year-old she'd left. He was bigger now, 9 years old, taller, his features more defined, growing into the king he'd someday be. But his eyes, that fierce amber stare, were exactly the same. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Then Asher ran. Elena caught him stumbling back as he crashed into her. He was almost too big to lift now, but she managed, holding him tight while he clung to her like he'd never let go. You came, he said, voice muffled against her shoulder. I thought I was scared you wouldn't. I'm sorry. Elena's voice broke. I'm so sorry I stayed away so long. You're here now. He pulled back, grinning through tears. That's what matters. Father's going to... His eyes widened. He doesn't know you're here, does he? No. Oh. Asher's grin turned mischievous. Oh, this is going to be good. Come on. Asher, I look terrible. I need to... Ruby, he bellowed. The former servant appeared from around a corner, already smiling like she'd expected this. Thought you might need help, she said. Come on, we have 40 minutes to make you presentable. Ruby worked miracles. Within 40 minutes, Elena was clean dressed in a gown that fit perfectly deep forest green that brought out the gray in her eyes, and her hair was arranged in a style that made her look almost regal. "You look beautiful," Ruby said, stepping back. "I look terrified," Elena corrected. "That too, but he won't care. He'll just see you." Ruby squeezed her shoulders. "Now go, before you lose your nerve." The great hall was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. The energy of a major celebration thrummed through the air. Elena slipped in through a side entrance, staying near the back. No one noticed her. All eyes were on the front where Callum stood beside his throne. He looked older. Not much. A year wasn't long in the lifespan of a shifter, but there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. A weight to his shoulders that spoke of lonely months and heavy responsibility. He wore full royal regalia, black and silver, his house colors, a crown of twisted metal that looked more like a burden than an honor, and he looked exhausted. The ceremony began, formal words about bloodlines and duty and the future of the kingdom. Asher was presented, standing straight and proud at his father's lawn. With the curse fully broken, the herald announced, Prince Asher Northridge is confirmed as crown prince and heir to the Stormcrest territory. Thunderous applause shook the hall. Callum placed a smaller crown on Asher's head, a silver circlet beautifully wrought. Then he spoke, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "My son has faced darkness that would break most adults," he said. "He survived because of courage, because of determination, because someone believed in him when no one else could." His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "Someone taught him that being trapped doesn't mean being lost, that love is worth fighting for, that sacrifice is sometimes the truest form of strength." He paused, and Elena saw the grief in his eyes, the longing. "I wish she were here to see this moment," he continued quietly, "to see the man her courage helped create." Father Asher said, loud enough to be heard, "She is here." Callum's head snapped up. "What?" Asher pointed directly at Elena. "She came." Every head in the room turned. Callum's eyes found hers across the distance, and the expression on his face, shock and hope and desperate, aching relief, made her knees weak. "Elena," he breathed. Then he was moving, stepping down from the dais, crossing the throne room with long strides that ate up the distance between them. The crowd parted before him like water. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he reached for her. "You're here," he said. "I got your letter. I didn't think, I thought you'd moved on, that you'd found." "Never." The word came out fierce. "I heard you were getting married. I thought you didn't need—" "I'm not getting married." His hands came up to cup her face. "There's only you. There's only ever been you. I'm sorry I stopped writing. I was scared. I thought—" "I know." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "I was scared too, but you're here now." "I'm here now," Elena confirmed. He kissed her. Right there in the throne room in front of the entire court, the AlphaKing kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The hall erupted, gasps and whispers and shocked exclamations. Elena didn't care. She kissed him back, pouring a year of loneliness and longing into it, feeling pieces of her broken heart start to knit back together. When they finally broke apart, Callum rested his forehead against hers. "Don't leave again," he whispered. "Please, I can't survive losing you twice." "I won't," Elena promised. "I'm home." Asher crashed into both of them, wrapping his arms around them in a fierce hug. "You came back," he said, laughing and crying at once. "You really came back." "Of course I did." Elena held him tight. "I promised I'd try remember." For a long moment, they just stood there, the three of them, a family whole again. Then Callum seemed to remember they had an audience. He straightened through his arm and stayed around Elena's waist like he couldn't bear to let her go. "The ceremony will continue," he announced to the hall. "But first," he looked down at Elena, "there's something I need to do." Hours later, after the ceremony had ended and the guests had begun to disperse to their chambers, Callum found Elena on the same balcony where they'd stood a year ago. The Montana peaks stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. The air was cold and clean and smelled like coming snow. "I've been looking for you," he said, joining her at the railing. "Needed air. It's overwhelming being back." "Overwhelming good or overwhelming bad?" "Both." She leaned into him when his arm came around her waist. "I missed this, missed you, but coming back means facing everything I ran from." "You didn't run. You sacrificed yourself for Asher." "I know, but it still feels—" She stopped. "And now Asher announced I'm going to be queen, and I can't be Queen Callum. I'm—" "Stop." He turned her to face him, hands framing her face. You're not broken? You never were. The council won't accept. The council will accept what I tell them to accept. I'm the Alpha King. His voice held absolute certainty. And if they have a problem with my choice of queen, they can challenge me for the crown. I welcome it. You can't fight the entire council. Watch me. He smiled, fierce and feral. Elena, I've spent a year without you. A year pretending I was fine when I was dying inside. I'm not wasting any more time worrying about people who can't see your worth. But what about heirs I can't give you? I have an heir. Asher is strong and healthy and more than capable of ruling after me. He pulled her closer. I don't need you to provide children or continue bloodlines or fulfill some dynasty requirement. I need you to be my partner, my equal, the person who challenges me and grounds me and reminds me why any of this matters. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. That's a lot of pressure. You've been doing it since the day we met. You just didn't realize it. Callum, let me ask properly. He stepped back. Then to her shock, dropped to one knee. What are you doing? She hissed, looking around frantically. Asking you to marry me? He pulled out a ring, simple silver with a single dark stone that caught the starlight. I know it's fast. I know the kingdom will have opinions. I know there will be challenges and difficulties and people who say you're not qualified. He looked up at her and his wolf gold eyes were full of love. But I also know you're the bravest, most intelligent, most compassionate person I've ever met. And I know I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. His voice dropped. Elena Ashwood of Pinewood Ridge, will you marry me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my mate? Will you choose me the way I choose you every day for the rest of our lives? Elena looked at him, this powerful Alpha King on his knees before a she-wolf who couldn't shift, and she felt the last piece of her shattered heart slot into place. Yes, she said, yes to everything. Callum stood in one fluid motion, sliding the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably had it made months ago, waiting for this moment. Then he kissed her, and the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. You're mine, he whispered fiercely. My mate, my queen, my everything. And you're mine, Elena breathed back. My king, my love, my home. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. Forever. Forever, she promised against his lips. A throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Celine Ravencroft standing in the doorway, her ice-blue eyes glinting with amusement. Congratulations, the priestess said, but I'm afraid your celebration will have to wait. We have a problem. Callum's arm tightened around Elena. What kind of problem? The kind with 5,000 soldiers at our southern border demanding the return of one Elena Ashwood. Celine's expression was grave. Victor Kane survived the blizzard, and he's come to collect what he claims is his. The war room was already full when they arrived. Council members, military commanders, and scouts clustered around a massive table covered in maps. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Report, Callum commanded. One of the scouts stepped forward. 5,000 soldiers, Your Majesty. A mix of mercenaries and warriors from the southern territories. They've made camp 10 miles from our border. Their leader, a man calling himself Victor Kane, sent this. He handed over a scroll. Callum read it, his expression going deadly calm. What does it say? Elena asked quietly. He claims I stole his property, that you were legally purchased to satisfy a debt, that by harboring you I've violated southern law. Callum's voice was ice. He's demanding your return, or war. Then give him war, one of the council members said. An older man Elena vaguely recognized. We can't afford to fight over one woman, Your Majesty, especially not. Finish that sentence and I'll remove you from this council permanently, Callum said softly. The man paled and shut his mouth. Your Majesty, another council member tried. We have perhaps 3,000 trained warriors. We're outnumbered. And for what? A woman who can't even shift, who has no strategic value. She has value to me, Callum said. She's my mate, my chosen queen, and I will burn every territory to ash before I hand her to that monster. But the cost is irrelevant. Callum's eyes blazed. Elena saved my son. She broke a curse that would have killed him. She sacrificed her own happiness to give Asher his freedom. And you think I'm going to hand her over to a slaver because it's convenient? Silence fell. Here's what's going to happen, Callum continued, his voice dropping into command mode. We're going to prepare for battle. Asher will be evacuated to the mountain stronghold with Ruby and a guard detail. Elena will go with them. Callum, no, Elena started. Yes. He turned to her. This is not up for debate. You're going somewhere safe. Asher needs you. And I need to know you're protected so I can focus on destroying the man who dared to threaten my family. I should stay. Fight beside you. You are fighting. You're protecting our son. That's trust. That's partnership. His hands framed her face. Let me do this. Let me keep you safe. Elena wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes, the absolute certainty. This was how he showed love, by protecting, by fighting, by refusing to let the people he cared about come to harm. Okay, she said quietly, but you come back to me, you hear me? You don't get to propose and then die gloriously in battle. That's not how this works, he smiled, actually smiled. Deal. He kissed her, not gentle, but fierce and claiming and full of promise. I love you, he said, against her lips. I love you too, so don't do anything stupid. I'm going to do something incredibly stupid. I'm going to fight 5,000 soldiers for the woman I love. He grinned, but I'm going to win. The evacuation happened at dawn. Asher, still in human form, clung to his father in the courtyard. You'll be okay. I'll be fine, Callum assured him. Ruby and the guards will keep you safe, and Elena will be with you. I meant you. Asher's voice was small. You'll be okay, right? You'll come back. Callum knelt, bringing himself to eye level with his son. I promise I'm not leaving you. Not ever. Your mother, Isabel, she didn't have a choice. But I do, and I'm choosing to come back. Asher hugged him fiercely. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son, more than anything. Elena watched from the carriage, her heart in her throat. When Callum finally stood and walked toward her, she saw the determination carved into every line of his face. Take care of him, he said. You know I will. And take care of yourself. He leaned in, kissing her one more time. 3 weeks, maybe a month, however long it takes to end this. And then I'm coming for you. We're getting married. And we're building the life we should have had a year ago. Promise? On my life. On my crown. On everything I am. He pressed his forehead to hers. You're mine, Elena Ashwood, and I protect what's mine. Then he stepped back, and the carriage began to move. Elena watched through the window as Callum grew smaller, watched him shift, his massive black wolf form appearing in a blur of power and howl, a sound of fury and promise and absolute determination. He'll win, Asher said quietly, pressing against her side. My father always wins. Elena held him close and prayed he was right. 3 weeks later, a rider came to the mountain stronghold. Elena was in the garden with Asher when she heard the commotion, ran to the gates to find a warrior in Stormcrest, colors his armor blood-stained, but his face triumphant. Lady Elena, he said, bowing, the king sent me. The battle is over. We won. Relief crashed over her so hard she had to grip the gate to stay upright. Callum is he, alive and unharmed. Victor Kane is dead. The southern armies scattered. The king requests your presence at the castle. There's to be a wedding. Elena laughed. Actually laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and joyful and free. Tell him we're coming, she said. Tell him we're coming home. The wedding happened 2 weeks later in the castle gardens where Asher used to play. Small, intimate, just family and the few people whose opinions actually mattered. Celine officiated, speaking words in Old Lupine that translated to something about souls recognizing each other across lifetimes. Asher stood as his father's best man, grinning so widely his face might split. And when Callum kissed Elena, when he took her hand and declared before witnesses that she was his chosen mate, his queen, his forever, something shifted in the very air around them. Power, recognition, the universe itself acknowledging their bond. Did you feel that? Elena whispered against his lips. Everyone felt that, Celine said dryly. You just created a true mate bond without either of you being able to shift. Congratulations. You've rewritten several fundamental laws of shifter magic. Is that bad? Elena asked nervously. It's unprecedented. Celine smiled with genuine warmth, which means it's exactly right for you two. The celebration afterward was joyful and warm. No formal receiving lines or political maneuvering. Just food and music and people who actually cared. Elena danced with Callum, with Asher, with Ruby, who cried through the entire thing. And late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed, she found herself back on the balcony with her family. Queen Elena, Asher said, testing the title. It sounds right. It sounds terrifying, Elena corrected. You'll be amazing, Callum assured her, arm around her waist. You already are. I don't know the first thing about being queen. You know how to see people, really see them beyond their status or abilities. That's the most important thing a ruler can do. Your father's right, Asher added. You saw me when I was trapped. You saw him when he was drowning in grief. You see everyone. Elena looked at them, this fierce, beautiful family she'd found in the most impossible circumstances, and felt something settle in her chest. Thank you, she said quietly, for fighting for me, both of you. Always, Callum said, kissing her temple. Always. They stood there as the stars emerged. Three people who'd been broken in different ways now whole together. A family forged in sacrifice and sealed in love. 3 months later, the knock on Elena's study door was hesitant. Come in, she called, setting aside the trade agreement she'd been reviewing. A young woman entered, maybe 18, silver hair and eyes that shifted colors, blue one moment, green the next, amber after that. She wore traveler's clothes, dusty from the road. Your Majesty, she said, curtsying awkwardly, I'm sorry to intrude. Someone told me you might understand my situation. Elena's heart recognized that tone, that desperate hope mixed with fear. Sit, she invited, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. What's your name? Mira. Mira Westbrook. I'm from the Southern Territories. I came because I heard about you, about a queen who can't shift but rules anyway. Elena knew where this was going. What's your situation, Mira? I can shift. That's not the problem. The girl took a shaky breath. The problem is I have 3 forms. Most shifters have one animal form, but I have 3 different ones, and everyone says that means I'm cursed or defective or... Her voice broke. My pack cast me out, said I was too unstable to keep around. 3 forms. Elena remembered Celine mentioning something about ancient bloodlines, about shifters who could see truth in ways others couldn't. Show me, Elena said gently. Mira stood. Her body shimmered, and suddenly a white wolf stood before Elena. Then the wolf shifted, becoming silver fox. Then the fox became a snow leopard, each form beautiful and powerful and unique. She shifted back to human, eyes wide. You're not horrified. Why would I be horrified? You have an amazing gift. It's not a gift, it's a curse. No one can be 3 things at once. Why not? Elena leaned forward. Who made that rule, Mira? I can't shift at all. By every law of shifter society, I shouldn't exist. And yet, she gestured around the study. Here I am, Queen of Stormcrest territory, happily mated to an AlphaKing, raising a crown prince. She smiled. The rules aren't absolute. They're just comfortable lies people tell themselves. But how do I live like this? How do I make people accept? You don't make them accept anything. You live your truth. You surround yourself with people who see your worth. The rest will either figure it out or they won't. But that's their problem, not yours. Mira's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how. Then stay, Elena offered. Stay here for a while. Figure out who you are when you're not being judged. Learn to see your 3 forms as strengths instead of flaws. You'd let me stay just like that. I was once where you are, broken and lost and convinced I was worthless. Someone gave me sanctuary. Elena's voice softened. I'm just paying it forward. Mira dissolved into tears, relief and gratitude and hope all mixed together. After the girl had left to get settled, Elena found Callum in the doorway. He'd been listening, a small smile on his face. You're going to collect every outcast in the kingdom, aren't you? He said. Maybe. Elena moved into his arms. Is that a problem? Not even slightly. He kissed her softly. You're building something. You know, a place where different isn't wrong, where people can be themselves without fear. Is that too idealistic? It's perfect, Callum said, pulling her closer. Just like you. From the corridor came Asher's laugh. He was already teaching Mira how to navigate the castle, his voice bright with excitement at having someone new to befriend. And Elena thought about the riddle, the one Isabel had left behind. I am given freely, but never taken. I can be broken, but leave no pieces. I grow stronger when tested, yet I am the most fragile thing. What am I? Love, but also family, home, promise, a promise to see each other fully, to choose each other daily, to be brave enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to be gentle. Elena had kept her promise to Callum, to Asher, to herself, and in keeping it, she'd found something she thought she'd lost forever. She'd found her pack, and she'd learned the truth that sacrifice had tried to teach her in that Montana blizzard a year ago. Sometimes the broken things become the most beautiful. Sometimes the outcasts become the heroes. And sometimes love messy and imperfect and brave is enough to change everything.